So I saw this yesterday. It is very easy for a guy like me, or even Joy, right? We can rip somebody after they make a mistake. That's easy. But I like for both of us to have opinions before something happens. So in real time, therefore, I'm culpable for my opinion. When the Rams got Brandon Cook, I hated it. I said, I like him. But if Sean Payton and Bill Belichick bail on somebody, that's a sign. It's like Warren Buffett bailing on a stock. You may be concerned about acquiring the stock. And I also didn't like what they paid him. So full disclosure, I never liked Brandon Cooks. Great kid. Wonderful kid. He's got concussion issues. I've been told he's considered retirement. I think he's a little bit of a one-trick pony as a receiver. He's a speed guy. I don't think you have to put your best corner on him to limit him and marginalize his game. I also think the Rams had plenty of good wide receivers. That was not a team weakness. The O-line had no depth. The linebackers at the time were average. That was a problem. And he's expensive. And so, great kid. I was never a fan of what he did in New England. New England saw it, moved off, and I didn't like the Rams doing it. So let me start with that. Good kid, I wouldn't pay him. But this trade is really not about Brandon Cooks. It's about two teams with talent in big markets who are increasingly dysfunctional. So let's start with Houston. I have defended Bill O'Brien as a coach. I don't like him as a GM. And even the DeAndre Hopkins move, he just didn't want to renegotiate the contract. I think he should have gotten a couple 2 second-round picks, not fourth-round picks, but I understood moving him. So I've tried to be defend Bill O'Brien more than most. But let me ask you, they have Will Fuller, can't stay healthy. Randall Cobb, Green Bay got rid of him because he was always hurt. Kenny Stills I like, but he missed 3 games last year. And Brandon Cook, concussion issues. Are you guys just in the business of finding wide receivers who are not healthy? And it's the greatest wide receiver draft all these scouts and GMs are saying in the last decade. You gave up a 57th pick, a second-round, mid-second-round pick. There are going to be Pro Bowl wide receivers taken in the second, third, and fourth round. And they're going to be cheap labor, like what the Patriots want. I don't get it from Houston's standpoint. Bill O'Brien now is the head coach and the GM. He's got too much darn power. It's like when you're the boss and the coach, essentially his parents left for the summer and left him the house, and he's just lost control. And they gave him some money, and he spent all of it in the first 3 weeks, and now he's eating cornflakes for dinner. He's just making crap up, trying to cover his butt from previous bad moves. I don't like it at all for Houston. Secondly, for the Rams. Oh, Colin, you're an L.A. guy. You'll probably support what the Rams did. No, I won't. They pay too much money, and they pay everybody early, and they fall in love with players. Wrong. The great personnel people fall in like with everybody. Even Belichick with Brady. It was mostly a like affair, not a love affair. And, the Rams, if Bill O'Brien is the kid whose parents left him the house for the summer and he's gone out of control, the Rams are the guy that loves cars and keeps buying cars and has a collection of cars and wants to show everybody his cars. And he doesn't need all the cars. Here's my sports car. Here's my SUV. Here's my Hummer. Here's my Kia. And guess what? The minute you drive them off the lot, they're all worth 30% less. They just collect stars. And in the end, think about this. Brandon Cooks was under contract in 2018 for $8 million and could have been franchised for $16 million, meaning the Rams could have theoretically gone year to year and paid him $25 million for the first 2 years. Instead, they gave him a new contract, paid him $42 million first 2 years, and by waiting until March 15th to trade him, that triggered a $4 million roster bonus for Cooks. Now, on his way out of town, they'll have a $22 million cap hit. I mean, again, if you fall in love with cars and keep buying them, they lose 30% when they get off the lot. The Rams and the Texans are doing something I hate in life. They're confusing activity for efficiency. It's just bad move, bad move, bad move, bad move, trying to follow up on a move that didn't work. New rule in the NFL. Pay almost nobody big money and never pay anybody except the star quarterback early. And you'd stay out of 90% of these problems. Don't overthink the room on this stuff. Jameis Winston last year is 7-7. If he wins his last 2 games at 9-7, he's probably still a Buccaneer. He went 0-2 in the last 2, 7-9, and they went and got Tom Brady. Teddy Bridgewater last year Drew Brees gets hurt. Teddy Bridgewater sits in for 5 games and goes 5-0. Suddenly there's a market. If he goes 1-4, 2-3, or 3-2, the market's smaller. Win games. Cam Newton, since the Super Bowl, a 500 quarterback, no market. Nick Foles, less talented. Winning, didn't have a huge market, but he's been a Super Bowl MVP. He's played very well in some of his biggest games, and he found a market in Chicago to compete for a job. And he's also not a celebrity backup. Okay, Jimmy Garoppolo, 21-5, winner. Jameis Winston, 20 games under 500, loser. That's what this is about. Win games, there's a market. Jameis Winston doesn't win enough. Jimmy Garoppolo wins a lot. That's why I like him. I don't like Russell Wilson because he's the perfect height. He's not. Or has the best ball. He doesn't. I like him because he wins. I'm not a fan of anything Dak does, but I'd franchise tag him for another year because he wins a lot. I wouldn't give him 5 years, but I wouldn't let him go either. I wouldn't let him go. I don't like his arm. I don't think he's a great athlete. I think he misses open receivers. I think he throws off platform. A lot I don't like about Dak, but he wins. And so I'm going to franchise tag him with McCarthy 1 year and let's see how it plays. But this is Marcus Mariota is the greatest example. It's just about winning. It's in my business. If I get ratings, nothing else matters. I'll get more advertisers, more affiliates, more money, and more love. It solves every issue. I used to work at a company. They'd be like, I like this person. They're smart. And I always said, can they get ratings? Because Harvard's full of smart people. They can't do radio shows. Get ratings, solves everything. Solves everything. Rachel Maddow gets ratings. Sean Hannity gets ratings. They're stars. Doesn't matter if they're always right. She whiffed on the Russia thing. He whiffs too. Get ratings. In the NFL, Marcus Mariota. In 2018, he went 4-0 in his last starts, and he stunk. 11 touchdowns, 8 picks. He was no good. But they let him start the following year. The following year, his stats were way better. 4 times as many touchdowns as picks, but he went 2-4. What'd they do? Bench him for Ryan Tannehill. So when his stats were better, and you could argue, he's playing better. They benched him. He went 2-4. At the previous year, he was 4-0, and they're like, he's our guy next year. Let's get Tannehill back. He's a guy. Win games. Jameis doesn't win. Cam didn't win enough. Teddy Bridgewater, less talented than both, wins more. He won in Minnesota. He won in New Orleans. If Teddy Bridgewater doesn't go 5-0 when he replaces Brees and goes 1-4, there is no market for him because you're going to find all his faults. Well, he's a little small. He's not very athletic. He doesn't have a big arm. That's why Alex Smith got a Washington offer. Alex Smith won games. We don't like his arm. We don't like him in big games. Alex Smith ends up in the playoffs a lot. So you're like, there's a market for him. So, Nick Foles, now there's not a big market for Nick Foles, but when you think of Nick Foles, what do you think about? He's often better in big games than average games. So there's a tiny market for him in Chicago to possibly beat out Mitch Trubisky. Listen, Mitch Trubisky gets all this love because he's 19-10. If you watched Trubisky and he was 10-19, he would have been on the first bus out of Chicago a year ago. Win, Jameis. Win more. Get more offers. It's not difficult. So Dana White scheduled fights in Fresno, and they got canceled. I'll give you a little background on this story. I used to work at another place. Disney owns ESPN. Disney is one of those companies that does worry a lot about public image. They have a very nice brand. They don't like their brand damaged. And so when the New York Times is critical of Disney, they watch. The New York Times was very, very critical of Disney allowing ESPN to put on a UFC fight when we're not even through the peak of the coronavirus. And so the California governor, it was reported, called Bob Iger or whoever now makes all the big decisions at Disney. Used to be Iger, maybe not now. He moved into content. And they called Disney. So the California governor called Disney and said, hey, come on. Come on. Not in my state, please. So then Disney called UFC and said, Dana, out. And so yesterday, Dana White said, it was kind of funny. He just said, I want to thank the city near Fresno and the casino that was going to put it on. We'll pay you back later. But the highest powers canceled this. Okay, so here's Dana telling you why he canceled it.
Today, we got a call from the highest level you can go at Disney and the highest level of ESPN, and the powers that be there asked me to stand down and not do this event next Saturday.
And that's because the governor of California called, and Disney's a huge employer, and this is the way the game works. Disney wants to be on the right side of the governor. You want governors to like you. You ask for a lot of favors in big business from governors and politicians, right? And so that's the way the game works. I credit Dana White for going for it. He's an aggressive guy, and that's why he's got $300 million in the bank. And UFC has fought like you know what to get to this spot. They had to fight boxing. John McCain at one point threw him off cable. They've had all sorts of battles with New York State. I have a lot of respect for Dana and a lot for the UFC. But in this instance, I do think what is interesting is the governor of California asked for a solid from Disney, and they delivered it. Will Disney, which owns ESPN, which has the ESPN NBA contract, go back in 2 months and ask a solid from the governor to say, let him play with no fans at Staples Center? Because my former employer is hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars not having the NBA. It is a painful situation. So that's kind of the story behind the story with that. I credit Dana. I understand Disney's power. They're concerned about how the New York Times views things. California governor calls them. New York Times is banging on him. They call Dana. He backs off. That's kind of the mechanism. That's how the game works. So, but I do think that the NBA, I think the NBA, I'm reading a lot about this and making calls. I think the NBA thinks they've got a shot to start the season back up at some point in mid to late June, with or without fans, probably without initially. And I hope they do. I think the NBA's always done a good job to curry favor with the media, especially the New York Times, the big media. And I do think the media will give the NBA a little bit of a pass where they wouldn't give the NFL a pass or, college football a pass. I think the mainstream major media will give the NBA a little bit of a pass if they go in first, because they were the first to stop their league and be progressive. So that's my gut feeling on how it works, and I'm crossing my fingers. I love the NBA. I don't want to see my former employer lose hundreds of millions and people lose their jobs. And, it's a fluid situation. I think once we get past the curve, we just got to manage it like we manage everything else in our lives, our health issues, our families, our bosses, our jobs. We're not solving all of our problems. We're just managing them. And I think once we get past our peak, we have to go into a crisis situation. And there will be cases and there will be deaths next year. You manage it.